Hey, this is StarCraft 2 History Part 25, and this one I'm talking about the Blink era. And the Blink era depends who you ask. Either starts or I personally believe it starts at the end of 2013, so the last few months, basically after Deer wins the GSL, because at that point everybody understands what Deer is doing, and so the shit he's doing is going to start spreading across the world, but especially in Korea. And you don't actually see those innovations because at the at BlizzCon, because none of the great Protoss players except for SOS from Korea is going to adapt them quite quickly. Actually, Hero was there; he probably could have, but Hero actually ran into SOS, so you don't actually see it yet. But basically, to define the Blink era, basically, among many of David Kim's sins, the first and foremost must always go to Broodlord Infestor, but this is a pretty good second or third place. Depends on, of course, how you want to rate the Swarm Host era. Now, basically, what's going to happen here is the way the Blink era works, and the reason it's called that is because the a unit called the Mothership Core is going to be introduced in Heart of the Swarm. Basically, is already introduced in 2013, and as Protoss players continue to play with it, they realize a few things about it. First and foremost is you don't really need to use it defensively. Basically, it has such ridiculous range and it can recall, so there's no particular reason you need to keep it at home. Once you figure out the timings, once you figure out the builds and refine them and so on. And then what they also learn is, wait, if you combine this with Blink Stalkers, you could literally scout everything the Protoss player, the Terran player is doing, and then you can punish them if they fuck up. And on top of that, you can macro behind it with huge leads because you're going to get huge amounts of trades. You're always prepared for a backstab if they do anything. And even if you're in trouble, you can just recall. And so that is why we call it the Blink era, because basically Protoss starts dominating. Now, there's also the caveat to be said that all of the great Protoss players are going to rise up. And what I mean by that, all of the great Protoss players, is basically among the different like Kespa players that played the different races, my personal belief is that the Kespa Protosses were by far the best. And so we already have Deer. I already talked about Zest is going to come up very soon. Now, there was already Rain, of course. And then, I'm not going to count Parting as a Kesper Protoss, but he's definitely an amazing Protoss at this time. But basically, CJ Hero, Stats, Classic, Trap, they're all coming up as well. So there's a shitload of Protosses. And of course, San himself, a player that's not that rated that highly, is actually pretty good during this specific period of StarCraft 2. And of course, Liquid Hero, basically his last hurrah comes at this point, and arguably his highest level of skill comes at this point, basically with the Blink era, because it just plays directly into his strengths. Always been a very aggressive Protoss, always been somebody who macros behind aggression. So, that's just his forte. So it's been something he's been very good at. And basically, if you look at the premier tournament victories, basically it's like Deer, SOS, Parting, Hero, Rain, Zest, CJ Hero, San, Classic, Pig Baby, Stardust. Basically, Protoss is winning fucking everywhere. And the only Terran, and I'll put it this way. Basically, if Innovation wanted to convince me he was greater than Life, or greater than MVP, or greater than Sue, or greater than Tasia, this is the era he should have done it in, because this was the most competitive era. A. B. It was a meta that was bad for Terran. And finally, there were other Terrans that were able to fight against it. Innovation wasn't. Innovation basically dies out. He loses a bunch. Dies on Kode. Doesn't do much in anything until basically the Blink era is over. And now we'll talk about the three rebels, because basically Tasia, of course, is the first, and he doesn't get to play against the Blink era in its full capacity, but he does very well in the limited amounts he has, specifically DreamHack Winter, where he beats both SOS and Hero. And I actually think he probably could have defeated everybody else as well, just he didn't get the chance to play against it just because of the way his style works out. Basically, Tasia is a player who has consistently shown throughout his entire career, even at the very end of it, that he can come back from anything and outplay the Protoss in the late game. If you don't believe me, watch his final matches against Zest in Legacy of the Void, basically in like the first GSL season, where he's basically just fucking around, because at that point he's actually playing Overwatch, he's not playing StarCraft 2. Even then, he basically gives like Zest one of the hardest like matches of that season, despite not having tried. Now, first was Tasia. Second is Maru, and Maru is basically proven it in Pro League, but he also proved it against Deer. Basically, Maru is the guy before Marine, Marauder, Mine, Medevac, MMMMM was a thing in StarCraft 2. He was doing it before all of them, and he was doing it without like the extra buffs against shields. It's also why I credit Maru with being the best micro player, because while every other Terran player needed those buffs, Maru did not. Maru made that shit work without the buffs. That's how great Maru was. Y'all weak compared to Maru, basically. Now, the final player to rebel against the Protoss Blink era is going to be Pult. And basically you have a direct sort of comparison between somebody like Innovation and somebody like Pult at IEM Cologne, one of the best tournaments of StarCraft 2's history, in my opinion, because basically Pult is going to do the shit everybody else could not do, and he's going to, let's see here, he's going to make a run to the finals, basically beating a bunch of Protoss players. He beats Classic, like I said, Classic GSL winner. Can't fuck with that. He beats Rain, one of the all-time great GSL winners. Plays Liquid Hero in the finals, loses a Hero 4-2, but it's an epic finals. Whereas Innovation, he beats MC. Like MC, like I said, on the downslide, not as good as he once was. Beats Hero Marine to get out, then loses to Hero 3-0. Basically gets knocked the fuck out. And basically, here's what's happening in my opinion is, and the basis, like this is like just one example, but basically it's like an example that corroborates with the rest of Innovation's career is basically like Innovation needs a meta where Terran is strong. And once he gets that, he's probably, in my opinion, the best player at in that type of meta. Basically, he's the best player at getting those refinements, getting the execution down. But unlike Maru, unlike Tasia, unlike Pult, he doesn't have the incredible stylistic tendencies to break out and win in metas that are very unfavorable towards the Terran race. And so that's obviously like a piece of caveat, where it's like Innovation, he needed something more, basically. He either needed to dominate more, or he needed to dominate more in like the metas where he was very good. Like for instance, I thought he could have won 2017 BlizzCon, except he fucked up, for instance. But basically, or he needed to like win in metas where it like wasn't even that bad. Like for instance, he played against Zest and he still lost his Zest in recently in Legacy of the Void. Basically, like there's always these weird hiccups with Innovation where like he's pretty close to ascending, but then he doesn't do it. And obviously, very early on, I was like a choke to Sulky, but basically, whatever. It's an important era basically because even though it's imbalanced, it kind of shows it certainly shows the incredible tactical mind of Pult at its highest point, and one of the rare points where you actually get to see him play against the world's best. And so it's very important to note that. It's also important to note how incredible Maru was as a player, because I think, in my personal opinion, because of the way the imbalance works, you're basically forcing, in StarCraft 2 anyway, you're basically forcing great players to show their greatness. And obviously Innovation never did it, but Pult and Maru certainly did during this time period. And both of them were like incredible fucking players. So there you go. that is the Blink era, and it ends eventually with Tasia winning again. Basically, like that's kind of the story of Tasia. But yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys later.